Thank you all for coming. This is no fun when it's all just by myself. So I appreciate all of you joining tonight. Who has not been to a Tipsy talk before? Oh man, what warmth to my heart this brings. So, the Tipsy talks are something that I stole. It's not my idea. I borrowed it and you know, massaged it into what it is today. This is our third year running. Jasper's is a lovely establishment and serendipitously well set up to host a bunch of people who like to hear themselves talk while they drink and look at other people staring back at them. So I encourage you all to become one of those people who likes to talk while drinking and getting stared back at. I will make a plug and a pitch for this. If you find yourself to be fascinating, interesting, comically humorous, please find me, volunteer yourself to tell a Tipsy talk. We are pretty much booked for this year, but we're always looking for more. This is our third year running. We'd love to do a fourth and a fifth. So the way this works is we kind of do these 10 to 20 to 30 minute talks. They can be a story, they can be a passion project, they can be a love affair, they can be a heartbreak tale, they can be anything you want. They can be history, natural history. We've heard all sorts of things. Tonight we're going to hear from Kelly Stuber, as I mentioned, and Kim Prangley. I'd like to just set the stage and bring us all back into this little hobbit hole nexus of a storytelling room by sharing a tale that I experienced myself as a young man, coming of age in the world of the West, you could say. I had a job one summer taking kids out into the woods. And I still like going into the woods. I don't take kids into the woods anymore. And maybe this tale will kind of enlighten you as to why. But it really, like looking back on it 10 plus years later, it's like, geez, this is a pretty formative experience, right? So I found myself working for this company. Most of the name of the company is in those first two words. And they're based in the West. And I had been to the West once or twice, and it was like, this is the place for me. So I applied for this job, I got it, and they said, sure, you're hired. We're gonna give you this van, and that U-Haul trailer, and 10 children. And we're gonna send you out into the unknown, right? Oh. So, no, I had a coworker, a co-leader. Her name was Kate, I can't remember her last name. She was a great person. She grew up in Manhattan, had never driven a 15-passenger van, had about 10 hours of driving under her belt, and so she was the soft skills person and I was the driver, right? And this is great. This is in the Tetons, and this is just us driving up from training to SeaTac Airport in Seattle to pick up our heathens, and it was a glorious start. And so when you receive 10 children from the airport, first of all, you actually do hold a sign with their names on it, waiting for them to come out of the plane. And then you corral them all. They're all a bunch of strangers, and they don't like each other. First glance, they just decide that they don't like each other. And then you say, pack into this van, and we're going to go. So then you drive down to this place, and like, we're going to do some team building. We're going to go rock climbing. We're going to climb this giant spire, right? So you send 10 kids, they're aged from 14 to 17, and you're like, we're gonna climb up this mountain, and then we're gonna traverse across this rope, and then we're gonna rappel 800 feet down this face. And it's called Monkey's Face, and you can see on the left panel, it kind of looks like an ugly monkey. And that's a dude, I can't remember his name, honestly, but he's rappelling all the way down. That's actually me in the right, scrambling for my life to get across this rope. But it was an amazing experience because the guides that took us on this climb knew how to take a bunch of strangers and force them into a situation where they had to rely on each other, they had to communicate, they had to exert physical strength, mental strength, emotional strength. So this whole company's motive is like, we're going to take your piece of work kid, send him out into the woods, and they're going to come back this refined, you know, high, strong character edifice to your ideal of what a child should look like, right? And so to the woods we go. So we spent a few days in Smith Rock, and it was great. And the kids started to like each other. And then we were actually like, okay, that was exerting. Now we're going to go take a couple days and we're going to go floating. Has anybody ever been rafting before? If you're not the guy paddling the boat, it's pretty lazy. Unless you're in whitewater, and then you're just terrified the whole time, right? So we were on the Deschutes River, and I had 10 children, mind you, to start. And
how many did you bring home to start?
You'll see, there's a common theme here. You get this red bracket and a little caption telling you how many are left. And just a disclaimer, my wife hasn't seen these photos or heard these stories, so everybody here is new to this tale. Those are some cute little ducklings we saw. But this is a boat. In the front is a person in our group. By the way, these are all kids back then, but it's been 13 years, so I don't mind showing their faces, because honestly, you probably couldn't pick them out of a crowd. But there's 10 kids there to start, and it was a really good dynamic to start, right? Until one person felt that they really didn't want to be there anymore. You could try to help them along, try to encourage them, but when a young person makes up their mind about not wanting to do something, it's pretty hard to convince them otherwise, right? So when somebody who's very, very pasty and isn't out in the sun much and is now exposed to reflection from the water and western sunlight without accepting an offering of sunscreen, if you're a 16-year-old young woman, I cannot forcibly apply sun lotion to your body, right? And so when you get second-degree burns on your skin, there's not much we can do. And so ultimately that person was not having a good time, and eventually decided that they were going to forcibly extract themselves from the situation. And so they didn't want to be there. So we put them on a call with parents talking to child. My boss has three-way called in to monitor the conversation. Parent knows, child does not. Child says to parent, I'm just going to throw boiling water on my legs until you get me out of here. Okay, you're going home. So 1 down, 9 to go. Oh, sorry, that was a little premature, but 1 down, 9 to go. So then we were going to go climb a mountain, right? Because what more team building do we need other than climbing a giant glacially capped peak? So we go to Mount Adams. Okay, we got 9 kids. We're going to do this. We're going to get up that mountain. It's, only like 7,000 feet above us. But we've got trained guides, and they're great people. And then we got stuck in 36 hours of a blizzard in our tents. Could not leave. 7 tents scattered around this lunch rock, we called it, at about 11,000 feet, just below the summit. Couldn't make the summit because we're stuck in this blizzard for 2 days. How do you keep 9 young adults entertained in a tent for 2 days without fooling around with each other? Couldn't be done. And then the sky broke, the storm disappeared, and we were left with these beautiful sunsets and sunrises. And we never did climb that mountain. But we overcame a challenge, right? We succumbed to the weather, we tolerated it, and then we moved along. So then we went to climb another mountain, because why the hell not? We went up to Washington from Oregon and decided to go up Mount Baker. And Mount Baker is like a very active volcano. Some people ski it, you can also climb it, and it's a very cool spot. This is just a normal day on Mount Baker. Just enjoy it for a moment. We had a really great guide system from the, from the American Alpine Institute. They taught us all sorts of cool things like how to self-arrest, how to rescue out of a crevasse, how to walk around with crampons without stabbing yourself in the leg, how to put on sunscreen regularly, right? We actually had this guy, Paul. He was incredible. The guy had been up Everest like a dozen times. And this young woman, Liz, who was kind of an apprentice coming up. And she was really good at connecting with the kids. Unfortunately, this young woman died a few years later. She was a Patagonia ambassador. She was skiing down in Chile and actually got taken out by an avalanche. So that was really unfortunate. And, that just comes with the territory of that industry. But we got 7 kids up that mountain. We had 9. 2 of them didn't want to go, so they hung down at base camp. And then we got 4 kids up to the top, which was pretty cool, right? You got almost half the crowd up the mountain, and it sucked because like you're wearing, alpine boots that 3,000 other people have worn before you, and you're in rain gear and wind gear that your mom bought you at REI that is like not really rated for, going up into 12,000 feet. And to get any of these kids up there was pretty cool, and to get up there with them was amazing. We had to do an alpine start, 3 o'clock in the morning in the dark. That was pretty fun. And then we're like, let's go have a lazy walk. Let's go down the beach, take these kids on a sandy stroll down on the Olympic Peninsula, which is not nearly as flat as you might think when you think about a sandy stroll. You got to climb up these crazy bluffs and down into these little coves. And this is what we did for like 5 days. We walked through. It's crazy because you got to time it with the tides, right? When the tide comes up, you can't walk the beach. So if you don't leave at a certain time in the morning, following the tides, you don't make it to the end by dark. So that happened. We found this cool feature. This is like literally 10 miles from a road that people just collect buoys and stack them on this giant root wad. That's like a 15-foot tall root wad. We still got 8 kids. You might ask what happened to the 9th. On our way out here, we came out of the Mount Baker Wilderness, and this is 2012, right? You had cell phones, but like it wasn't everywhere. My coworkers' phones just blowing up with voicemails. One of the participants' mothers had been in, what do you call it when you get through cancer? Remission. And then all of a sudden it came back. And so she had this like stage 4 or 5 cancer, in her liver that was like come back with a vengeance. They had been trying to contact us for 5 days, and they were not able to get a hold of us. We come out of the woods, and we find out that this kid's got a flight booked for that afternoon, and we are 3 hours away from SeaTac. And so, pedal to the metal. We take that 15-passenger van, and we're doing 90 down the highway to get this kid to the airport so that he can go fly home to Atlanta, say goodbye to his mom before she passes away. And he was like the patriarch of the group, right? He was the 17-year-old. He was the biggest sweetheart. He was a giant bear of a kid, and everybody looked up to him. And he had to go early, which sucked, right? Because he was the glue. And so the weird thing about this one guy is that he loved chewing sunflower seeds, and he wouldn't just like spit them into the bottle and throw the bottle out. He carried that damn spit bottle around for like 3 weeks. And so eventually, when he left, he accidentally left his spit bottle in the van. And we carried it around for a month after that. We brought Dan with us everywhere. And so this is Drew. I don't remember the other guy's name, but this is Drew holding Dan's spit seed bottle. And he's bringing it with him, and he's holding it proudly for everybody to see on the beach. So then we go, and we're like, all right, we're done with walking, let's go sit in a boat. So we go paddling again, and we end up in the San Juan Islands, and we get taken out to these little islets, I would call them, because I swear to God, they're smaller than this room, right? Like that one, we camped on that. And you see there's a critter in this tree. That's a raccoon. This island is called the Island of Misfit Raccoons because the little bastards swim out there and then they raid your camps. And so one night we're all cooking dinner, and there's signage everywhere at these campsites like tents, cooking, kitchen, right? And so like, okay, so set up our tents, we bring our kitchen over there. I'm cooking dinner and something's in my bag that I gotta go get. So I walk back to my tent and I'm approaching my tent and I hear, I'm like, one of the little kids is in my tent. And so then I start, get out of my tent! And it doesn't respond. I'm like, oh. And so then I come around the side and I see this 3-foot gash through the whole side of my tent. I'm like, oh, it's a raccoon. So then I get, Drew, come on over here. Drew. Of course I send the kid in front, right? I'm like, I'm gonna shake the tent and you unzip the door, right? So he gets in position and I get in position. And I say, 2, 1, and he unzips, ah! And that raccoon emptied his bladder all over my sleeping bag. And I don't know if you've ever smelled raccoon piss, but I dunked that sleeping bag in the ocean for like 3 hours, and it did not do a damn thing. And so I slept on the sand for 3 days after that, and never did keep that sleeping bag. But on the way back from that site, we still had 8 kids. They were all alive. They were all healthy and happy. They had come from these strangers. This one in particular was a real piece of work, but ended up being like the star child, right? He came out of his shell. He stopped being he started being like the leader of the group. He started solving conflicts between other kids. And one of these ladies, this one, I was in Vietnam 5 years after this, and I posted something on Facebook, and she's like, I'm also in Hanoi. So then we got together, me and a friend and 2 of her friends went out for Thai food. She told me all these stories, or Vietnamese food. She told me all these stories. These little buggers were breaking into cars at the campsites, stealing booze, smoking wild mushrooms that they collected in the woods, screwing each other in the sleeping bags, and I was oblivious to everything. And I was only 4 years older than the oldest one. So, send your kids to camp and just pretend that nothing happens there. And now you have an opportunity to refill your drink, use the restroom, before Kim gets up on stage and tells us about the Stone Circle.
So we're ready to start talk number 2. I'm assuming you can hear me in the back. I'm used to talking on stage, so it doesn't bother me to talk nice and loud. I'd rather not deal with this and a microphone at the same time, because I'll end up talking into this instead of the microphone. That was a very difficult act to follow. Yes. Very funny. I had a pet raccoon when I was a kid, and that raccoon used to in my toy box. And my grandmother, who was from Scotland and very proper, she would come up and babysit sometimes. And my mother had trained the raccoon to come for its food when you rang the bell. And Granny came up and she was tidying up and she picked up the bell and it started to ring. And the raccoon came out. And so she was like, woo, woo, woo. And she's running with the bell and the bell's still ringing and the raccoon's right behind her, right? And she's going around the table with the raccoon chasing her. So, and then the raccoon also liked to climb the curtains. It would go right up to the top. But I have a fond memory of raccoons. But anyway, my name is Kim Prangley. Some of you may know me because I ran the Haskell Library and Opera House for 25 years. So you might have seen me around town. I live in Stansted. I was actually born right here in Newport, so I'm a dual citizen. And how many people here actually know about the Stansted Stone Circle? A few, not too many. Well, how many people here know about Stonehenge? Exactly. So it's kind of a similar thing. So when I worked at the library for 25 years, as I said, and then I kind of burnt out. It's quite an intensive job. And I needed some time to recuperate. And so I did. I took some time off. And I started to have these dreams that I never had before. And they were very symbolic dreams. I won't go into them all because we don't have time for that. But after experiencing a number of these dreams, I finally ended up going on a trip to Wales, United Kingdom, for a month. And it was an amazing trip. And while I was there, the very last part of my trip was on the summer solstice. And my hostess took me to a sacred site, and it was amazing because it was out in the middle of nowhere, but it was surrounded by trees. Now, a lot of stone circles in Britain are created in places that are very lonely and desolate. This one was incredibly intimate in this little grove of trees. And as we were walking down the path to get there, the roses, the wild roses and the thistles were over my head. And I remember looking at them and going, oh my God, they're taller than I am. And I felt like I was in a fairy tale, actually, I really did. And as we got closer to this grove, I could see people in amongst the trees, because this particular sacred site was surrounded by this grove of trees. And then I saw what I thought were like two women dressed in black doing like this, and I was kind of like, wow, I think I just saw a witch. And then they disappeared. And then I kept walking, we kept walking, and we got closer up, and then I realized that the whole area around the sacred site was actually filled with people there to celebrate the summer solstice. And what I had seen were two women dressed in black. And so in the middle of this grove was, they call it a long barrow. So it's a burial place, and it's very long like this. And then in the front, they have two stones that stand up and one like this. And there's a little sort of room that you go inside. And this was the key place where everybody wanted to be. So these two women were standing on this long barrow doing their whatever it was they were doing. And then when they were done, they moved off to the side. And then someone else would come and go up onto the sacred site, and they would do their own little ritual, whatever it was they wanted to be. So this does not happen in Stansted, right? So I was like in awe that this was what I was there to witness. And because we had arrived a little bit later than the other people, we sort of had to wait our turn to get up onto the tomb and do our little ritual. And the person that I was living with was a shaman, and I was a novice, right? I was there to learn. So by the time we got up onto this tomb, most of the people were already done, and she had her drum and she was drumming, and I was just absorbing it all, and I was her support system. And so as I was sitting there listening to her, I happened to look to my right, and I could see the sun was just going down over the horizon. And I looked to my left, and the full moon was coming up on my left. And it's like I was between them both. And if I held my hands out like this, I had the sun in this hand and the moon in this one. And I was in heaven at that point, right? And I remember thinking, wow, we don't do this in Stansted. My heritage is all England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, so I have loved stone circles forever, basically. And so I was just, really, we don't do this in Stansted. And so I actually said out loud to the universe, I need a place like this. I need something like this in my life. So that was amazing, and there were many other interesting things that happened on the trip, which I can't get into right now. But when I came back to Stansted, I really felt like I needed to have a sacred site of my own. And I started looking around to see where I might find an appropriate place. I knew a couple of people that actually built stone circles professionally. And one of them told me that the most powerful stone circle he'd ever been in was made by a woman with stones small enough that she could carry them with her own two hands. And so I was like, great, I can do this, right? So I started looking around for a place, and I started collecting stones that I thought might be good. And in the meantime, I went down to the dowsing convention in Lyndonville. Anybody a dowser here? Yes, a few people. And while I was at this dowsing convention, there was a man there giving a talk on building stone circles. And he said, if you really want to be involved with any of this, leave me your email, and if I'm ever building a stone circle in an area near you, I'll let you know, and you can come and help me. So that's what I did. And then a couple of years later, lo and behold, I got an email saying, I'm building a stone circle down in Massachusetts, and it's for an intentional community down there, and if you would like to participate, please come. So I couldn't believe my luck, right? So I signed up for that, went down there, and this man was British, and he had moved to Vermont. He had actually built stone circles by hand, in several places in England and even Australia and various places. And so he was going to do this particular stone circle by hand, but we were just putting in one stone because it's really quite a lengthy process, right? So he said that when you do this, you have to talk to the stone. So every morning we would get up, and it was like probably from here almost to the pool table, the stone. And we would all put our hands on the stone, and we would talk to it and tell it that we wanted it to move and give it our love and all this, and it was very interesting. So when so to build, to move this stone into its hole by hand, he built up a cribbage, and he would, add another piece and lift it up a little bit and add another piece and lift it up like this. So gradually it was way up where it needed to be. And there was a big hole that we had dug at the base of where the stone was. And at the end, like this, the stone was sitting on a post that he had put in the ground. And when it was time to insert the stone into the ground, he took a sledgehammer and he hit this out, and the weight of the stone is supposed to just go cling down into the hole. Well, he had built this so perfectly that it was completely level, and he hit this thing out, and the stone just stayed there like this on its cribbage. And we had to go and push the back of it so that it would tip and go into its hole. So that was my first experience in starting to build a stone circle. And then it was his birthday a little while later, and he was building a stone circle on his property down in Worcester, Vermont. And so I was down there helping him. I think it was my 49th birthday, and I said it was the best birthday of my life. I was muddy, sweaty, stinky, sore, and in heaven, right? Because we were putting in this stone into the ground. So when I came back from that particular birthday party, a friend of mine in Stansted, who knew that I really wanted to build a stone circle, had been busy while I was away, and he said, "Kim, I found you a place to do the circle, and I've got you some free stone." So I was like, wow. And there was a quarry outside of Beebe that had been abandoned, and it was just, he contacted them, and they said, yeah, you could take any stone you want, just help yourself. So I got free stone, right? That was amazing. And he had negotiated with the town of Stansted to lease this particular piece of land that's very close to the border. It's, just a few hundred yards across the border. And so that was amazing that he got, when I came home from doing this stone circle building thing, and I can do my own. So that was amazing. And this person, his name was Bashar. He was not quite on the same level of spirituality that I was. And he really wasn't interested in the spiritual aspect of the stone circle, which is what I wanted. And he was thinking more of a monetary kind of making money kind of thing. And he wanted it done like tomorrow. And I kept saying, Bashar, that's not how it's done. When you have a stone circle, there's usually an alignment with something on the horizon. There's a reason. It's maybe aligned to the stars, et cetera, et cetera. And he was really pressuring me to get it done right away. And I kept saying, that's not the way it's done. So I would say to the universe, listen, you don't give me the opportunity to make a stone circle and then screw it up like this, right? You've got to help me deal with this man. So anyway, I knew that I wanted it to represent certain things because Stansted, basically, we're right on the border. This whole area, as I'm sure you all know, is really located on the 45th parallel, right? And so that's halfway between the equator and the North Pole. That's a very important place on the planet. And to me, if you have 2 points like this, and then there's one in the middle, that's a point of balance, right, between the two. And to me, that means peace. And so I wanted the stone circle to be a stone circle for peace. I wanted it to reflect that we lived on the 45th parallel because that's an important part of the community. I wanted it to reflect the fact that we were divided by United States and Canada, French, English, half and half. And the equinox, as I'm sure you all are aware, is when the cycle is exactly half night and half day, it's equal, right? And so to me, that was the logical thing that I wanted the circle to represent, was that point of balance, the peace, the half and half, and all this. So my friend Bashar wanted it done right away, as I said, and I kept saying, universe, you can't do this to me. It's got to be done properly. What's the point in making a stone circle if it means nothing, right? So it ended up that I did go and I chose every stone. Everything was chosen. And we had to postpone it until the spring, which was a good thing. So I thought, oh, well, that's okay. And maybe we'll put it in on Beltane, which is the 1st of May, which is also a special time. That didn't happen. And then I thought, well, maybe we'll put it in on the solstice in June. That would be a good time to put it in. That would be symbolic. And that was when I had my experience over in England. And that didn't happen. It started to rain, and it rained all summer long. And so the biggest stone that I had chosen weighed 32 tons. And the person, Stansted's a granite community, right? So we have all the people around who are used to working with stone. We had the quarry, we had the equipment. It was really very, very lucky for me that it made it a lot less expensive to do because we had all the support right in the community. So Christian Willette, who was putting it physically into the ground, said, we absolutely can't put the stones in until the ground is dry, because the 35-ton stone, you're going to drive out into the field and the truck's going to sink into the mud and we'll never get it out. We'll never get the stone out. So we have to wait. So I forgot to say that when I decided what I wanted the stone circle to represent, and that's what this is about actually, because we're on the 45th parallel. And this is a statue that was actually a sculpture made designed by a woman from Vermont. Her name is Kate Pond. And you know Kate Pond? Sure. Yeah. So she's designed several of these, and they are specifically designed to be located on the 45th parallel. So she has other ones of these I know there's one in Holland somewhere. I don't know where they all are. But this one, she wanted to locate at the Haskell Library on the lawn while I was the librarian there. And my board said, no, it's ugly. We don't want it here. And so it ended up going up to the Colby Curtis Museum in Stansted, and it sits right on the lawn. Now, it's a pretty nondescript looking sculpture, isn't it? I say to people, it looks like a sewer pipe that got pulled out and thrown on the lawn. But it's designed exactly like these old ancient sites where you have an alignment and the sun will rise at a certain time and the sunshine will go down into this passageway and light up the interior of a tomb, right? And there are many places like that, not just in England. There are so many in France and Portugal and everywhere. So as you can see here, the V part, the top part, is where the sun hits and it casts the shadow onto this piece here. And there are little tiny buttons here you could see, and those actually mark the time of day. So it's showing you the equinox shadow, right? Because we're on the 45th parallel. So when I knew that I was creating my stone circle, I went up there on the equinox in 2008, and I went during the time when the shadow was actually passing across that bottom pipe. So it went across my body, and I was telling the universe what I wanted my stone circle to represent, the things I've just told you. The 45th parallel, it's a circle for peace, and blah, 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 blah. So that was a nice way, I thought, to begin my project, was to set my intentions on this particular thing, honoring what I want to honor as well. So that was in the fall. And then we had to wait until the next summer to put it in. And so as I said, it rained and rained and rained and rained and rained. And so finally, towards the beginning of September, almost a year later. Christian Willette phoned me up. He said, Kim, next Tuesday morning, be there, 7 a.m. We're going to put the stone circle in. So I was like, okay. And I went to the calendar to write it down, and it was a year to the day that I sat on this bottom pipe and let that shadow of the equinox cross my body. And we were going to be putting the stone circle in that very same time a year later. So I do have some slides. That's, you can see that better. That's just showing you the shadow growing along the bottom. And then that's a little plaque that's on that sculpture explaining what it is. And most people drive right by it. They haven't a clue what it is or that it's even important. So this was the plot of land before we actually started to do the circle. You can see the shape there. We had to prepare a base because a lot of the stones being very heavy, we didn't want them to sink into the ground. So they had prepared this circle with a deep, deep section of compacted crushed granite and then more soil on top and da-da-da-da-da. Now you can see some little rays coming out around. That was my friend's idea. He wanted it to have 100 rays of indigenous medicinal plants growing around the stone circle. Well, he's a city slicker. And he wanted me to research that. And I was like, are you kidding? 100 different medicinal plants that are indigenous, because even dandelions are not indigenous here. And they all had to be different, right? So he ended up preparing the lines, and he planted buckwheat in them to prepare the soil for these 100 different types of, that I was supposed to find. I just blew them off. So that's the prep. And this road right here is Notre Dame. And so up here on this side is the Canadian Customs, right? And just on the other side of that would be the American Customs. So when we started, it was the 22nd of September, and this is my friend Ivan and I. And he's the man that did the stone circle workshop that I had attended. And I asked him to come up and just be with me as a matter of support, and because, you know, he's a great guy. And I just wanted him to be there with me. So he came up for the first morning, and we were just looking around. Nobody else was there but us at this time. And he happened to notice the sunrise come up over the ridge to the east. And he said, Kim, there's your equinox sunrise. And I'd never even had time to note the equinox sunrise, because a year before I was sitting on that sculpture saying what I wanted, and I had never had time. So he said, someday you can put a stone up there to mark the sunrise, which I thought was amazing. So I have slides of the event, really, basically. So you can see some of the trucks coming in. We had to rent a crane. The crane was the most expensive part of the project. And so this pole in the middle is marking the very center of the circle. And so if you are creating a stone circle, in the ancient times, they really did line it up with, you know, various stars and different things. And I knew that I wanted to line it up with the North Pole, the North Star, Polaris, right? And so that meant that everything was going to be exactly like a cross, north, south, east, and west, very, very specifically. So we needed that pole in the middle to make sure that we could place our stones in the right places. And today people will go to the stone circle with their phones, and they tell me that the north stone is in the wrong place because their phone is telling them it's wrong. And I say, well, no, it's your phone that's wrong, because your phone is telling you what magnetic north is, which is floating, right? We all know it's been drifting towards Russia or whatever. And this is based on Polaris, which is the North Star, which doesn't move. So this is true north, right? So that's what that pole is for, to keep us oriented. So we had a lot of people from the community who were volunteering their time. This gentleman was responsible for preparing the base, and then it was like a dream to watch him manipulate his whatever it's called, and help to adjust the stones. And for part of the day, he had his newborn daughter in his arms while he was in there doing this, with one hand, like it was nothing. That was fun. So this is the North Stone. It's 35 tons. I said it looks like the space shuttle, kind of, doesn't it? Yeah. And it's a very kind of deceiving photo. You can't really see the depth of it and everything, but it was a big mother. He said all the time. So I figure I can.
We're in a bar.
And this is okay, watch this now. That's the North Stone.
Portrait.
Cool, right? So actually, when you go to the stone circle, you only see from about here up. And all this is buried underneath the ground. Yeah, I say it almost looked like a hangnail or something. It was a very odd shaped stone. But, people don't realize. So if you're putting in a standing stone, depending on the shape of it, if it's really just a very cylindrical one, you have to bury 1/3 of the stone in the ground so that it stands up, right? Because this one had such a huge base, it wasn't that crucial, but wait till you see it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, hello.
Yeah. It was huge. And this is my friend Ivan. He's a big man. I mean, look at the size of this thing. I was glad he was there. I was really glad. So I think you can probably all
Does it
see
say
those.
this side up?
Pardon me?
On the bottom, does it say this side up?
I don't know what it's. Oh, it says base.
Oh, okay.
So some of the stones that I had chosen, there were two that I actually had them dig out of the ground for me because I could see pieces of them sort of peeking out of the ground, and those are the ones I liked the best because they were natural stones. And a lot of these have been manipulated by the granite industry, and you'll see marks on them. Even at the base here, you can see the stripes. That's where they would drill and put the dynamite to break the stone out of the quarry, right? And some of them we knew would be sitting flat on the ground, and so they were taken to one of the granite sheds, and the bases were cut off perfectly smooth so that they had a good base to stand on. And as I said, the prepared base that the man with the backhoe had prepared previously, we would put down another, I have to, what?
10.
I have 10 minutes left? Oh, God. Well, and then we have to, so anyway, you can see the prepared base, and so ones were put down and the stone would sit on it so it wouldn't sink into the ground. So here they are manipulating the big rock around to get it in the right place. I love this photo. You can see my friend Ivan. Look at him.
I would not be there.
It's a humongous stone. So, pretty interesting. I'll go through these quickly. I don't need to keep talking about them, but you'll just see this. The profile of the North Stone sort of looks like a lion, right? And there was some discussion going on at times. And this gentleman here is Gabriel Safdie, and you may or may not know that name, but he owns property in Stansted, and he very graciously funded the Stone Circle. So that was a huge relief. I love this one because he looks like he's wrangling the stone with this great big cable. And you can see, all that weird place at the bottom is buried. Now, this is the South Stone. This was one I had dug up out of the ground. And it's, you'll see it. But so it's being picked up here. And it fell out of the, whatever you want to call it. It crashed back down onto the flatbed. I was like, oh my God. But it was okay. The flatbed was fine, yeah. So to me, it kind of looks like a mummy, an Egyptian mummy wrapped up in its shroud. And unfortunately, a third of that gets buried into the ground. So it's such a gorgeous stone, but we don't see all of that now. You can see them putting it in. What does that say? East stone. Ah, yes, the east stone. So we had, the 4 directions, north, south, east, west, and then the other stones were really symbolic in nature. And if you're making a stone circle, actually all you need is intention, and whatever you want it to create, you kind of just put your energy into that, and that's what it's going to be about. So to me, those 4 alignments were the most important. This is like a base that we would have put one of the stones that had been cut flat on the bottom so that it wouldn't sink into the ground. That being one of them. So this is the east stone right here, the big triangular one. In the background you see 2 with a cross on top. That to me represented the 3 villages, Stansted, Rock Island, and BB, amalgamated into one. That's the west stone, so that's the complement to the other one that I just showed you. And then the first year that, when I went back a year later to witness the equinox and the sunrise, as the sun was setting, and I was sitting in the middle, it actually shone through one of these holes. And that was an unexpected thing. And it doesn't happen anymore because the trees have all grown up and everything, and you can't see that anymore at all. That was pretty cool. Just, that's a base for something. So I have one set of stones that I call the Canusa stones. You all know what Canusa means, right? Canusa, Can, USA. And we're waiting for the top part to come. There it is. I wanted it to represent the 45th parallel, and I didn't know how to make that happen. And my friend Ivan said, well, if you have the center of your circle, and you consider that the equator, and then you have the North Stone, and that's the North Pole, halfway between those 2 stones is basically your, the 45th parallel. So he said, just put 2 stones halfway between the center stone and this one, like this, and that will represent the 45th parallel. So that's what this is. That's one of the 45th parallel stones. And that's also my other favorite one because it got dug out of the ground for me, and it hasn't been manipulated by anything. It's a natural stone. This is the peace stone. And we put this in over 2 days. And I have to laugh because I imagine people who left Stansted on Monday and there was nothing in that field. And they came back on Thursday and there was a stone circle there, right? This is what we call the 3 villages stones. And it actually ended up, they did it incorrectly while I was out for lunch. And they had to change it later.
Good project manager.
Yes, well, no, you can't mess that up, man. Right? Isn't the crane huge?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here you can see, I think I mentioned, right, that Ivan said, Kim, there's the sunrise, right? And someday you can put a stone there. So this is the ridge where he saw it come up. This is the east stone, the east stone. And so it went in over 2 days, and the very last stone to go into the ground was the peace stone. And I had invited kids from Derby and Stansted, the local elementary schools, Stansted College. My daughter was teaching in Thailand at the time. All these kids wrote wishes for the future and that kind of thing. And I wanted to bury them under the peace stone. And I had invited the public. People came, they brought instruments. Someone even brought cremated remains of a loved one. The kids were there singing, and we were getting ready to put the peace stone into the ground. And Gabriel, who was the man that paid for the circle, and Christiana, the man physically putting the stones in, said, Kim, we don't want to put this stone in here because it's not big enough to complement the North Stone. I was like, what? we're about to put it in. The kids are here singing. How can you say this to me now? And, part of me was saying, I need to be reasonable and listen, and maybe there's a good reason, but I really couldn't imagine them doing this the very last second, And then we had one extra stone that I had taken, God knows why, but I had an extra stone sitting there on a flatbed, and Christian, the man, physically putting them in. He said, Kim, if you let me take this stone and put it into the ground instead of the one you want, he said, I will take the littler stone, the peace stone, and I'll put it up on the ridge where the sun will rise next year. And I was like, oh my God, yes. And I knew that was supposed to happen from the very beginning. But actually, I wasn't in charge at all. The universe was in charge. You'll see. So the very last thing that they did on the second day was to take what I had originally called the peace stone, and they took it up and they placed it up here. And I had to eyeball where I thought it went because I never had time to properly gauge it, right? And they promised me that if it wasn't in the right place, then they would move it later. And I had a friend arrive who, as they were standing this stone up, and he looked at his watch, and it was the exact moment that the sun moved into Libra, which is the exact moment of the equinox, as they stood this up on the ridge. So there's a pretty much final product. You can see the 3 villages is not correct there. So this was actually done at the beginning, but then we went back in December and did a couple of alterations, and we fixed that. We added a couple things. This is looking down at the stone circle from the stone up on the ridge. When we went back in December, we added a stone at the entrance. It's the welcome stone, so that's what's being put in. Again, you can see it's got sort of a wonky thing at the bottom. So it didn't need to be buried 1/3. It needed just to be placed flat on the ground. That was okay. You can see they cut the base at the bottom of this particular stone to make it nice and flat, so it would sit nicely on the prepared base there in front of it. This is what I call the earth stone, or the Gaia stone. This is one we put in December as an afterthought. That's the 3 villages after they fixed it. Looks much better. So in the center of the circle, there is this particular flat stone, and it actually will align you to what all the different stones actually mean and represent. So I had to wait 6 months, right, before I knew if I had gauged the right position to put the stone up on the ridge. And March, you all know, we can have lots of snow in March, right? Not a grain of snow on the ground that year, not a grain. So I went with a friend to see what would happen on the equinox in March the next year, 2010. And I kept thinking, I think it's 15 feet too far to the south. We need to move it to the north by 15 feet. But how am I going to figure that out by myself, right? Not many people want to get up at the crack of dawn and go out and do these things with me. I'm usually alone. So I kept thinking, well, I can't be in the middle of the circle watching the sunrise and up there manipulating something to say where it should be. So my idea was to build a little cairn of stone, which you can see right here. Oh, this is very weird looking. Anyway, so I put a little cairn of stone, and I went down to the middle of the circle on the equinox in March to see what happened. And 2 women came up and hung out with me, and we were drumming with excitement, and we saw the sun come up near the little cairn. There's something very strange there because the cairn looks like it's way over there. Anyway, it did come up where I had placed the cairn, and I was like, yes, I know now where we need to move the big stone, right? It needs to be where the cairn is. So I started to drum again, and my friends kept taking pictures, and they sent me their photos the next day. And there's the sun coming up where the cairn is, right? You can see the little cairn very vaguely in the middle of the sun. And then they sent me that, and I probably started to cry. I actually almost cry every time I see it anyway. That is where the sun went, and I said, oh my God, we're not moving that stone. If I had moved that stone to where the cairn is, it would actually obliterate the sunrise, right? And this is like a chalice, holding it up in triumph, right? Yeah. So this was the equinox 1 year later, and you can see, well, you can see that the sun is rising where it's supposed to. And these are just some of the events that we have at the Stone Circle now, some beauty shots. I like to do things there. That was actually the first fall after we put it in, very foggy. And I did manipulate the saturation of the photo, but wow, I love it. Oh, that's a double. We do drumming sometimes. This was the eclipse in April. So we had hundreds of people come and participate in that. This was a solstice celebration.
Oh, wow.
That was this year, right? Well, no, not this year. Last year now, when everybody was having all the aurora borealis. My peace stone. That's the eclipse. I love that photo. You can see all the rays. They're just in buckwheat now. We just leave them in buckwheat, and people love them. Dancing sometimes. This is the solstice in June, and I have a little stone out in the field that marks where you would see the sun come up through the trees, but it's there, right? It should be, and this is the buckwheat growing. So with the buckwheat, you get green in the spring, you get white flowers in the summer, and then in the fall it turns lovely brown. And that's what it looks like from the air now. I think that's it. You could all come up and visit, of course, right? It's a public park. And we have people there from all over the world. I did a little survey this summer. We have people from Puerto Rico, Morocco, India, Japan, the Indian Ocean. I couldn't believe all the places where people came to visit. So it's quite amazing, and it's very gratifying to see people enjoy it to that extent. So thank you.
Wow. I've been here, and I like knowing the backstory of the buckwheat, because we actually looked at it and we're like, what the hell is buckwheat doing here? You know? And like I love surveying, and so the whole time you're talking about this, I'm like, God, the layout. I want to know more about the layout. Tell me how you figured out the layout. But I'll bother you next.
Well, I went up in a plane after it had been put in, and I could see the rows of buckwheat like that, and I was like, oh my God, we're not moving that either.
No, it has to stay.
Gorgeous. It's like a giant flower from the air.
Yeah, it's a blossom.
So it looks white, because it's in bloom.
Yeah,
right there.
It's amazing. Thank you so much. That might be the most universal spiritual talk we've had at Tipsy Talk so far. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So you've got a few minutes to refill, to use the restroom, to bicker with your neighbor, and then we're going to hear from Kelly.
I'm Kelly. A lot of familiar faces. You're used to hearing me singing, not so much talking, although last year here at Tipsy Talk was the first time I'd ever done any public speaking. Yeah, other than like forced in high school, when you have to get up in social studies and you're this kid, like, this is how it ends right here.
I can't follow you, Kelly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sitting on a stool, and I tend to fidget. So I already warned her. I can't sit because there's no shorts. So anyway. This is completely unrehearsed. That worked for me last year because I was a last-minute fill-in. I'm like, so why mess with the system? If I mapped it all out, I would get too frazzled and overthink everything too much. So this is going to be as candid as I always am, even when I'm singing. And recently I had someone, a friend of mine, say, "Oh, so I see you're doing a Tipsy Talk thing and it's about mental health and music, and so you work in the mental health field." And I said, "No, I'm a patient."
Oh.
And in some ways, happily so. I mean, I would rather be a patient still above ground than someone who didn't go to therapy and isn't above ground. One of the biggest takeaways from 20 years or so of therapy and treatments and all that kind of stuff is, and it really hasn't even dawned on me. So again, it's learning about yourself and healing and what that journey is. You're not going through all of this to learn how to cope with your depression, with your PTSD, to cope with your griefs, dealing with grief, your losses and all of that. You're going through the therapy and working on your healing so that you can finally figure it out how to be happy. So that when your life does take a turn and you have these opportunities to be happy and have happy people around you or good things in your life, that you even know how to do that. You know how to be depressed. You know how to be sad. You know how to not want to be here. What you got to figure out is something that you can latch onto that helps you figure out why you want to stay here. And that's your family. And for me, that's music. Music's kept me above ground for 20 plus years, besides my son and my family that I hold close. So last year I spoke about some of my history. Yes, I grew up in both parents at home. They are both still married, almost 56 years now.
To each other?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and I have an older brother, a younger sister. Lived with our great aunt, all in one old farmhouse. There was no emotions in the house. Or just very emotionally constipated. That came from a Disney movie, Tarzan. It's a great one. And when I heard Rosie O'Donnell's voice through a animated gorilla say, "You are the most emotionally constipated thing I've ever met," I'm like, there's the words finally. Made sense completely. And so now it's one of my favorite things to look at my two siblings who haven't gone to therapy. My parents have made leaps and bounds in the last couple of years in learning about themselves and through their health struggles. I'm just the one who spent the most in therapy over the years. I described how we were a reasonably happy household, but everything was just at an even keel. Don't ruffle feathers. Don't be too sad. That makes people uncomfortable. Don't be angry either, because that's uncomfortable. And don't be too noisy. That's uncomfortable. So you just go through the motions. And it wasn't until I was much older that I didn't realize that not everybody's house is like this. When you're a kid and you're growing up, you don't realize what everybody else's houses are like. Unless you spend a lot of time at friends' houses. And I didn't really do that. I was that band geek. I was the poster child for band geek. Yes, I went to band camp. Can I play the flute? Not well. 5 minutes in and I'm hyperventilating and tipped over. I can play the clarinet for 8 hours straight. The baritone sax, the tenor sax, bass, the flute in 5 minutes. I'm like, world is really wrong. So yes, I was that kid. I sang in theater as a kid, never sang in high school. Finally, later on, came back to singing when I was 22. And I was asked to be in my first band. It was a country band. So I had given some of that background last year about how I didn't know how to have emotions. I never cried in front of anybody, including my family, unless I literally had broken toes or something. I would watch Bambi and Old Yeller and bite the insides of my cheeks and then disappear into the bathroom quick. Because even though I was sitting in my family living room, they're not supposed to see me cry. Or I'd wait till it was all over and the insides of my mouth were like, my mouth was just raw. And then go up in my room and make sure I buried it under the covers and cried really quiet. because that makes people uncomfortable. Fast forward a whole lot of years later, you figure out, oh, people are supposed to have these things. Many, many years of therapy later, I know how to have these emotions now. I know what they are. That is because of therapy, 1. 2, because of listening to music let me know even as a kid, I didn't know how to show anybody I was sad, but I could sing a sad song. And I know that's sad. And it's okay if I sing that, about that. You get some feisty Reba McEntire song back in the day. Why haven't I heard from you? You know, oh, she's feisty and I want to be like her, and she's sassy and that's power and that's all. I could sing that, but I didn't walk around the house like that. So little by little, these songs, these different types of songs, showed me what it was to have different types of emotions. Yes, I've had full inpatient hospitalizations. I've had ECT treatments on only one side, luckily. And it was just because they'd run out of everything else. You've taken everything, you've maxed out on everything possible. You're still in here and we don't want to let you out, so how about we try this? And I just thought to myself, you know, well, if I just do them, what's the big deal? At this point, I don't care. I just got to get out of here somehow. So I'll do them. And I signed off on a lot of paperwork. Don't get me wrong. If ECT treatments work for you, fantastic. If they don't, you just have leftovers. You, entire spans of memory gone from when my son was little, that kind of stuff. How I retain things when I learn things is slightly different. Why I have a music stand in front of me is on top of my ADHD that wasn't diagnosed until I was like 34 almost, and OCD components and major reoccurring depression and all of that stuff. You add in the ADHD and getting distracted by somebody that I'm singing to. You should see me at a Halloween event. I get so excited to dress up and then people walk in and I'm like, what? I'm trying to figure out their characters and I'm like, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. But still look like I'm having fun, but I can't remember, that's Captain Crunch. that's Toucan Sam, you know, and all these characters. Through all of it, coming back to the music, grounding myself in music, the one thing that seemingly came easy to me without having to fight at it too much, whether I was playing it and now it's singing it. So fast forward from that to me now trying to be more open with people about how do you take someone who you know is struggling and use music like I had to use music to open that conversation. Because you walk up to anybody who's been through all that childhood stuff where we didn't have diagnoses. It didn't matter if your dad had PTSD, if you did, you just grew up in the house you grew up in and you dealt with it. Now we have names for all of this stuff. And you can name it. You can't tame it till you name it. That's a key thing. You can't tame it until you name it. Because that's when you dig deeper on yourself. Like there's pieces of this, there's pieces of that. Then you can do the real work. Anybody who grew up in a house that was emotionally constipated, I expect to hear that somewhere. And I have yet to drop an F-bomb, so it's building. It's building. That's going to be my surprise element. My mother won't be very happy with me. I'll save that for the end. My mother would be like, oh, Kelly Jean. You're doing so good. You know, somebody's struggling, you walk up to them, hey, you doing okay? Oh, yeah. We grew up being people-pleasing perfectionists who know how to mask as long as the day is. When you're out and doing your thing, that mask is usually pretty firmly in place. I am professional at the masking. It's a hard thing to get past. It's a hard thing to open up and be vulnerable. When I am singing on stage, although it looks like I am strutting my stuff and the power is there, yes, there's an element of that. But you are also vulnerable to every comment hurled at you, every heckler that wants to be one, every 2 drinks past where they should have stopped, Joe Schmo that, hey, let me join ya. You're so vulnerable. And as anyone who has ever struggled with self-esteem issues or being in front of people and feeling insecure, that's the ultimate. When you're literally standing in front of a room of people, it's that first impression. You dress the part. So that's where I have to be careful with the masking. I'm dressing the part to be the person who's standing up here and entertaining you and stomping my feet for 3 hours and singing and being fun. And there are nights when I am driving to a gig and I am crying before I even get there. And I go, what am I doing? I am too tired for this. I'm exhausted. I can't do this. And then you get there and you start carrying stuff and you clean it up, and then I change my clothes. And that's the ultimate mask. Time to play the part. And thank God I do, because I know once I get started, I'll be fine. Then the music takes over. And I get a little bit of myself back. And I'm not that fidgety nightmare I was over in that chair for the last 45 minutes or so. Open that conversation. That person will say, I'm fine. No, I'm good. Well, no, you're not. Well, yeah, but I'm not going to talk about it. Walk up to that person, though, or sit next to them and say, what's your favorite song right now? Think about what your favorite song is right now. It opens that door. People aren't as afraid to talk about their favorite songs. Music is so very personal to each and every one of us. Start off that, what's your favorite song right now? What song are you listening to that when you want to dump your guts out and bawl till you can't breathe? Which one's that? And do you get stuck there? Because here's the thing I've also had to learn. To move through grief, to move through pain, to move through any of that with music and with your mental health. I now know, you can listen to sad songs and bawl your guts out. And there is a little bit of a therapeutic, that cleansing of just get it out. For me, it's panic. Because once I open that dam, can I turn it off? Can I shut it down again? So I now know I gotta have a plan. I plan my music grief. I'm gonna pick that song that rips me apart, makes me cry till I'm choking. And then what has to come next has to be tied to whatever I'm grieving about or the most upset about. And it has to be one little level not quite so gut-wrenching. I follow that up with the next song that is me saying, all right, what's that one song that anytime I need a kick in the pants makes me at least start to wiggle in my chair. Get you at least feeling like, no, okay. It's pulling you out of that hole that you're so worried about getting stuck in when you start. I'm horrible at grieving. Who's good at grieving? We're afraid of it. And maybe rightly so. Because it's that fear of getting stuck there. What I'm trying to share more with people now is let the music help you move through the motions. But give yourself that out. A good business plan has a way to come into business, and it also has your exit strategy. What happens if 6 months from now you hate each other, and you and your business partner are like, done, that's it. I hate you. I hate you. There you go. My mom is so proud right now. Give yourself that exit strategy. It'll still help you move through the motions. It will help you talk to someone that you know isn't okay and say, what's a song that gets you up and gets you moving? And whether you just sit next to them in the car, whether you're sitting at the kitchen table, just sit there and listen to music. Because sometimes you have no words for pain that you don't know how to describe. Not everybody knows the terminology. Not everybody's had 20 years of therapy and knows all the psychobabble to go along with it. But they can sit there and say, I haven't showered in a week. And I feel like so let's just crank the tunes and one by one move through them. And if they are a touch-based person, or I walk through Walmart, I gotta touch everything. Every fuzzy blanket, every squishy towel. Yeah, I'm very... So, lots of the time that I was in the hospital, you have art therapy classes. And one of the things as I was watching everybody else's behavior and everything, you definitely can't pick who you're in there with. You think you can't pick your family? Try picking full lockdown on an L-shaped wing where they don't separate people who throw poop from people who punched through people who just haven't slept in 3 months. And try eating meals together and sitting in circles and talking about whether you had a bowel movement that morning, because it has to be charted. When we would go into our art therapy classes, one of the things I noticed is whoever was teaching that day would just put on music they wanted to hear. And some days it was torn magazine art therapy, like collage work, no scissors. Think paper mache kind of stuff. Or it was watercolors or acrylics, things like that. If one teacher played blues, guess what the primary color on the canvas is? And the images would be, it would be grassy fields and water and oceans. When they would roll around to like jazz or like the more up-tempo stuff, you had these bright flowers and bonfires and spicy food. Somebody wanted to cook. The colors would change with the music. Your emotions change with the music, just like you tie to colors. It opens the conversation. If you can't talk through music, because of the words don't come. I don't care if it's ripping paper, sitting at a table making collages, just cutting out stuff, making a dream board kind of thing. It will open the conversation to a certain extent. And whereas we don't have words for some of our ick, music does. And you'll be sure as shit you can find a song that says something you need to say, whether you can say it yourself or not. You can tell a lot about a person. And one of my favorite things to do is maybe once a year, I'll do a thing on Facebook and just say, send me a song that means everything to you. And you'd be surprised at the answers you get. There's people that have seen me that have no idea any of my stuff. Well, you're not supposed to. That means I've masked firmly and I'm doing my job. But I find no point in 20 years of therapy I've paid for to not help somebody else out too with this process. Whether it's somebody you don't know how to talk to, somebody that you just notice in the passing by. Hey, how about you go crank some tunes? You don't even have to know that person. When was the last time you sat in your car and cranked some music? I've said that to somebody as I was walking by. And the guy was livid, pissed. I'm just having a full-blown of a day. And he was giving this customer, retail worker, a really hard time. And instead of saying, why you gotta be such a jerk? She's just doing her job. I said, when was the last time you cranked some music in your car? And he stopped talking, snapped right around. I said, maybe you should find a tune that works or something. Just saying. And I don't know if he knew how to take it, but I think he got my point. I'm not gonna belittle you. I'm not gonna tell you you're a jerk. You need some music. And tone it down a bit. And find yourself again. Hopefully you're not that guy when you're done, but there's gotta be something decent in there. With a little more kindness than what you're showing right now. So yeah, music is a way to connect. It's a way to have words when you don't have words. It's a way to help somebody else find words when they have none. And it's a universal language. And I encourage all of you to help others use it. And use it for yourself. Because it'll too keep you above ground like it has me.
You don't have a microphone, but sing a song, please.
Okay. I did this once a cappella. It's actually a tune from Sarah Bareilles. She's amazing. I've seen her in concert. Terrible storm rolled in. We all had to be evacuated, but she was still amazing. Man, of all the nights to have. It's called Once Upon Another Time. Hopefully, well, I did do a cheat sheet on words just in case this occasion arose. Because last year I was completely off guard. Once upon another time, somebody's hands that looked like mine turned the key and took a drive, was free. Highway curve, the sun sank low, Buckley on the radio. Cigarette was burning slow, so breathe. Just yellow lines and tire marks, sun-kissed skin and handlebars. And where I stood was where I was to be. No enemy to call my own, no porch light on to pull me home. And where I stood was where I was, because I was free. Once upon another time, before I knew which life was mine, before the child I left behind me, I saw myself in summer nights, and stars lit up like candlelights. I make my wish, but mostly I believed in yellow lines and tire marks and sun-kissed skin and handlebars. And where I stood was where I was to be. Once upon another time, decided not So I'd keep on driving because I was free. Tipsy Talks are a wonderful thing, so thank you.
Well, what did you think? Yeah. I don't have much to say other than I hope I made you laugh. I hope Kim made you think, and I hope Kelly made you feel. I don't know if this has any or relevance, but like, she's so brave. I came in from the same sort of household. It's like, you know, status quo. Yeah. You know, first time I ever had a therapist was after you gave a Tipsy Talk last year. So maybe there's you know, some sort of parallel, but I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. It helps. Talk about it. Talk about things. Talk about feelings. Talk about experiences. Talk at Tipsy Talks. Talk to me if you want to give a Tipsy Talk. Go home. You can't stay here. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Right back at the same spot. Have a good night. Thank you.